Good morning. Well, welcome everyone to, I believe, the second or third event, I've lost track now, which is kind of cool, of our mental health series and seminar series. This is sponsored by the Equity and Inclusion Council and the Wellness Committee. Bambi Bevel, the chair of the Wellness Committee, really wanted to be here with you all, but wasn't able to make it today. And she did want to remind everyone to read up on Goal 5 of the Wellness Committee's plan with the state to make sure that we are looking at emotional wellness with our employees. And so we're really pleased to have this presentation here. If you are an Equity and Inclusion Council member or Wellness Committee member, please stand or raise your hand to be recognized. Thank you so much. All right. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome our speaker, Wayne. And for those who are calling in or on the webinar, I'm just going to go ahead and apologize now because the internet, as we all know, is still not connecting very well. So this is being recorded. If it's not working, please take care of your emotional wellness and step away from it and come back when we have the recording available. Hopefully it'll get better this morning and this afternoon, but if not, we will have it for you later. All right, I'm just going to turn over to Wayne. If you have questions, please make sure to wait for the mic to get to you. That's really helpful for the recording because otherwise no one will know what question you asked. And I'll be assisting some with questions from the webinar as they come up. All right.
Great. Can you all hear me okay? The mic works all right? All right. Good morning. Good to see everybody. I was like panning across the room, figuring out where everybody is. Well, thank you for including me today in the discussion. My name is Wayne Scott, and I'm a clinical social worker. I have a private practice where I see a small number of clients. I also do a lot of training and teaching around the state on trauma-informed practices and how to use the ideas from trauma-informed practices in lots of different lines of business, lines of work, not just human services, but really, we encounter people who have trauma in their backgrounds in all environments. We encounter it in our coworkers. And so I'll be sort of explaining to you some of the basics of the framework and how it works. I'll be telling you a little bit about a particular field of research that I've been fascinated by for a number of years now called interpersonal neurobiology, and I'll kind of unpack that in a minute. I'll also be talking about, one of the big things when we're talking about trauma-informed practices, we are really talking a lot about the ways in which our bodies take in toxic levels of stress when we are working with people who are in crisis, right? It's not just kind of mentally and psychologically taxing, but it actually gets to the very core of our physical bodies. And so if we're going to do this work, and we're going to stay healthy over the long term, working with people in crisis, working with people who have hit a low spot in their lives, we have to understand how our brains operate. We have to how our brains process stress. We have to understand how our nervous system operates. And we have to know strategies, creative strategies that are very particular to us that help us to reset our nervous system when our toxic stress level is getting too high. So that's kind of the goal today. It's actually there's a big part of trauma-informed practices is self-awareness, really knowing who you are, how your own body works, how you deal with stress, so that you can be there and be fully present and clear when you're working with the clients that you work with. Do you call them clients or service users? Customers. Okay, so I'll call them customers then. Okay. Yeah, let me tell you a couple, just general, in the spirit of being trauma-informed, let me tell you a couple things just about how it'll go for the couple hours we'll be together this morning. Most of you probably have one of these little gadgets, right? I'm going to ask if folks don't mind to sort of, as much as you can tolerate it, to try to put it to put it off your radar for a couple hours. And I know that that's not going to work for everybody. What I am going to ask is if you have to take a call or return a text or anything like that, if you could go out of visual range, either out there or over to the side here. The reason for that is this very field that I just noted earlier, interpersonal neurobiology. The scientists who are in that field have discovered that the mere sight of you noticing someone else pulling out their cell phone will make something fire in the back of your head that will make you desperately curious to check your own cell phone. And so it creates this kind of secondhand smoke for our attention, right? So we want to not just sort of like be present and not be multitasking ourselves, but we also want to be protecting other people from the visual distraction of seeing other people checking their phones. The bathrooms, for those who are here, the bathrooms are outside of the room and around the corner. For those of you who are streaming, I'm hoping and praying that you know where the bathrooms are in your building. That would be terrible if you didn't know where they were. I will be taking, we'll be taking a formal 15-minute break in the middle. There are actually a number of activities we do today which will feel break-like. And I also want to just encourage folks to attend to your own self-care today, because we'll be talking about heavy issues, and sometimes, I don't know, sometimes it hits us personally and we just need a moment of quiet reflection, and that is absolutely okay. That's actually one of the ways in which we reset our nervous system and take care of ourselves. So I will not be offended at all if people need to just take a little break and leave the room. Any activity we do today is voluntary. Any discussion we do today is voluntary, and you don't have to share anything that you don't want to share. So I'll put that out there earlier. Giving choice is a really important piece of being trauma-informed in how we work with customers. Finally, I want to say I'm not so much of a lecturer and an expert teacher. I do better if I'm facilitating conversation. So I want to just encourage folks, if you have questions or comments or insights, to share them, and just raise your hand, and then who will be running a mic around to make sure we capture folks? It is so fun to talk into the microphone. And we have somebody who will be sort of the link to our folks who are streaming. Okay, so Teresa, you'll run the mic? Yeah. Okay, and someone will also be the link to our people who are streaming in, to sort of, if they have questions, that they'll report what their questions are to us.
And just an update, the internet is still really bad, so I think I'm going to recommend that they tune into the recorded one.
Gotcha. All right. So I won't worry about that. All right. So let me just tell you what we're gonna what the plan is for today. I'll start this morning by giving you just a little bit of context and history about trauma-informed practices and why it's kind of gained a lot of momentum nationally and internationally. How many folks have ever had any kind of workshop in trauma-informed practices or trauma-informed care? If you could just raise your hand so I know. So about 4 of you. Oh, 5 of you. Okay. So some of this might be a refresher. Some of it might give you some new information. Nothing happens in this field without attending to issues of safety. Understanding what it means for us inside of our bodies when we feel safe, what it feels like to feel safe physically, emotionally, psychologically. So we'll do an exercise to help us kind of tune into what safety means to us, but also what safety means to other people. Then we'll come to this idea that I'll explain more in a minute, this idea of emotional self-regulation. When children are raised in families where they have the basic amount of their needs met, and when they have caretakers who are reasonably responsive to their needs and their feelings and stuff like that, they're able to develop the capacity for regulation. When someone has adverse experiences, bad experiences in childhood, divorce, abuse, anything like that, the ability to self-regulate goes off track. It doesn't develop in the same ways. Doesn't mean that people can't recover it in adulthood, but it does mean that it's not there from the beginning. And for many of us working with customers who've had seriously adverse experiences, they may show up in a state where they're very volatile, emotionally volatile. They get activated really easily. They get stressed out really easily. And that comes back to self-regulation. So we want to understand our own self-regulation first so that we can then use that as a guide for understanding how other people self-regulate. Then I'm going to explain, we'll talk about some basic body and brain structures that you need to understand if you're trying to understand how your own body processes and deals with toxic levels of stress. We'll talk about this whole idea of triggers That's really important when you're working with someone who is very emotionally dysregulated. They do have trauma in their background, and it's showing up in ways which are getting in the way of you getting the work done with them that you need to get done. So we'll talk about what triggers look like. We'll also talk about how you can work with someone if they're triggered. And then we also talk about what you do when you're triggered, because that happens too. And then finally, and this will be depending on time, if there's enough time, we have a few scenarios we can look at to just sort of like look at some applied, how do you apply this information in a couple real life situations. We may or may not get to them. A lot of it will be dependent on how much interaction and dialogue and questions we have today. Are there any questions or comments so far? Anything about anything I've said so far? All right. There are going to be a couple activities today where it's going to be important to be close to other people so that you can have short discussions, short breakout discussions. So those of you who are sitting like way off in the sides might want to move in more towards the center when we get to the first one of those. Oh, and actually, I should say, I will just because of the nature. The workshop. This workshop itself, we put it together in a way that it would be trauma informed. And so actually, as we go through it today, I'll occasionally step out of the teacher role, facilitator role, and I'll talk to you a little bit about why what I did was just considered a trauma-informed thing, right? So actually, what we just did, where I kind of mapped out for you what was going to happen today, that's actually a trauma-informed practice. Anytime that we reduce uncertainty with people that we're working with, we are being trauma-informed. Uncertainty is, for many people, is a huge, activates really extreme stress for many people if they've been through trauma. So that's a parallel process. The way that you experience the workshop today will model a lot of the same principles that we hope that you'll work with when you're working with your clients. We're going to do just small group. I guess how we'll do this is maybe if I could have folks collect in groups of 4, like get together with groups of 4. I don't want to put anybody in the spot and make you talk into a mic. So, but we're just going to take 6 minutes. If you could just share with like 4 people in the immediate vicinity of where you are, what your name is, your level of awareness about trauma-informed care and practices, and maybe if there's anything you want out of today. And then if you want, and then afterwards, I'll ask if you want to put any of that out on the table, just so I know, so I can make sure I cover it when we get there. And we'll take about 6 minutes for that. And you will notice, even though I said don't pull your cell phones out, I will be looking at my cell phone because I have to time all the exercises. I'm not on social media. I'm just like, I just need to make sure that we stay on track. So let's take 6 minutes with 3 or 4 people in your immediate environment to go through these questions. All right, let's wrap up the small group discussion. And not required, but it would be helpful to me if there was anything that came up in that discussions that you want to surface for me and for the rest of the participants about what you want to get out of today, places where you get stuck or feel challenged with the customers or coworkers that you work with. I'd be interested to hear it. And I did get one comment from somebody about just being sensitive to the fact that some folks are more in the backstage of operations, not working directly with customers. So really thinking about how does this play out organizationally? How do we work with our coworkers when they are activated or triggered or out of whack? Anybody? All right, we're gonna be a quiet group today. All right, we'll keep going then. Also, people can tell me individually during breaks, stuff like that, if there are things that they would like to hear more about. Let me tell you where this comes from. It's been around for quite a while, actually, the idea of trauma-informed practices. One of the ways in which I really knew it was on the popular radar, there was an article in the New Yorker a few years ago about the doctor there is Nadine Burke-Harris, and she's one of the major people associated with this movement. She's a pediatrician, and the story, the Poverty Clinic, is about one of her experiences. She opened a clinic, a family practice clinic in a very destitute area of California, They were actually relatively well-resourced, so they actually could meet the needs of a lot of the families that came in there. And one of the things she noticed as a primary care practitioner is that she was treating a lot of the same conditions over and over again. She was treating asthma, diabetes, ADHD, depression, anxiety, all of these conditions that we know have a component that is stress-related, that get worse when people are under stress. And she was just noticing that there were a lot of kids and families that kind of cycled back into the clinic over and over and over again. And so she started to wonder, in the way that people who do public health do, what are the upstream factors that impact, that are contributing to this? I mean, I can just stay downstream treating individual children for their asthma, their diabetes, and just handing out meds and stuff like that. But maybe I should be curious about what causes these conditions in the first place. What makes certain populations more vulnerable to these health conditions that are stress-related? She was exposed to a study which is called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, the ACEs. How many folks have heard of the ACEs before? So a couple folks have been exposed to the trauma-informed care stuff. Yeah, it's really pretty seminal. It's actually pretty old at this point. But the basic idea of the ACEs study is that some children, when in their early childhood, are exposed to overwhelming experiences, adverse experiences like parental divorce, parental mental illness, domestic violence, poverty, addiction, that whole host of things. And that disrupts the development of their brains and their nervous systems, right? Which then leads to social, emotional, and cognitive impairment in how they deal with the world, their problem-solving strategies, right? Which then leads to challenges in coping, which then can lead to those very diseases and problems that Nadine Burke-Harris noticed in the pediatric clinic, which also predisposes them to early death, right? And that there's a really strong relationship. And in fact, the more adverse childhood experiences you have as a kid, the higher your likelihood of early mortality. There was a really direct connection between those early stressors and your health over the life course. So that was the ACE study, but then later researchers said, wait a minute, it might be more than just adverse childhood experiences. In fact, some kids from the very moment that they're conceived are come into social conditions and neighborhoods that are already embattled. They're already sort of, the deck is already stacked against them before they're even born sometimes. And that for children who are born into historically targeted or oppressed groups, there is historical trauma that gets encoded in the genes, in our genes, so that those kids they come into the world vulnerable, constitutionally vulnerable, because of the history of their people and what they've been through. And that in fact, aspects of that historical trauma are present and ongoing in their current reality. Right, so they continue to be in a world that is extremely unsafe for them specifically. Any thoughts about that or questions? Kind of sobering stuff. When we talk about organizations or health service organizations or service providers becoming trauma-informed, we're talking about them understanding the vulnerabilities or triggers of people who've had adverse childhood experiences. Actually, the other thing I should say about adverse childhood experiences, the original ACE study found that the number of people who had adverse childhood experiences was much larger than what we would have anticipated. That in fact, almost ubiquitous. And so in fact, one key principle of trauma-informed care is that we take an approach of universal precautions. So basically assume everyone has adverse childhood experiences. It will make it easier for those folks to engage. And for the folks who don't have adverse childhood experiences, it will not hurt them. Right? So it's good for everybody. So yeah, so the trauma-informed organization idea is this idea that we become kind of enlightened about how it affects our brain development, our nervous system development, how that shows up in our workplace, both in our coworkers, also in our customers, and that we can sort of take steps to ensure that like every interaction has the potential to be healing and empowering for people, and not be re-traumatizing or triggering or activating. So we're gonna do what's called a peripatetic dialogue. That means it's a walking dialogue. Walking dialogues. Actually, I just over the weekend on the radio, I was listening to a news show where they were talking about how walking dialogues are really big right now. So it's like the idea at work, as instead of sitting around a table in a room lit by fluorescent lights, where we're all breathing really shallowly and wondering how long until we retire. And we all know how fun that is. But instead of doing our meetings like that we actually get up and walk or have some kind of physical movement while we're having a discussion. So that's a walking meeting. So we're actually going to have a walking meeting. It's going to be around this whole idea of what our adverse childhood experience is. But if the internet will serve me, I'm going to show you a quick 4-minute clip, and we'll see if that works. If it doesn't, I may just give you the information myself. But these are the questions I want you to hold in your mind as you watch this. How does the information shift your perspective about the clients you serve? And then what are the implications for the work you do and your relationships with customers and coworkers? All right, so if we could all just cross our fingers. Oh, actually, before we do that, let's do a quick self-assessment. We're going to do a couple of these throughout the morning. If you have a piece of paper and a pen, if you could replicate these 3 scales, what I want to ask you to do is to give an assessment of where you're at now in terms of your energy, your focus, and your mood. Okay? And you're not going to share this with anyone. This is just for your own private reference. But if your energy is at a 10, you are ablaze with excitement. You are so charged to be here. You actually couldn't even concentrate on your weekend. You were so excited about coming to this workshop today. If your focus is at a 10, it's razor sharp. You've attended every word out of my mouth. You are ready to attack this topic and learn. And if your mood is at a 10, you're probably the happiest you've been in your whole life at this moment in this workshop, in your gray chair under these lights. So do a quick scale, honest, where you see yourself in terms of these 3 areas. And I'm going to try to get this thing connected up. Uh-oh. It's really slow. But it seems like it's working though. It's not like totally blocking me out. Give it like 30 more seconds, and if it doesn't, then we'll have to go to plan B, which I'll think about while this 30 seconds passes. Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna give up on it. All right. We're still going to do the activity, though. I think what I'll do is, let me see if I can share just a little bit more information about this. Just to give you some context, because I've seen the video about 500 times at this point, so I probably could actually just sing it to you. But let me try to just give you a couple of the main points that the video makes. So the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, it was done originally by Kaiser, but then there were researchers that followed who looked at other populations and their health risks as it related to stress. The big thing about the Adverse Childhood Experiences, it was over 17,000 people, right? But the thing to remember about them is they were all insured people, so they had a certain degree of privilege in society. So even in that cohort of privileged people, they found that an exponential number had adverse childhood experiences, and in fact, I think it was about 30% had 3 or more adverse childhood experiences, which meant that they were most vulnerable to disease, disability, social problems, and early death. One of the big things that they underscore about this is that biology is not destiny, that just because people have adverse childhood experiences that happen to them, it doesn't mean that the fate is locked in. That's actually one of the reasons why we talk about this with people who provide help and services, as well as with customers and clients themselves. The more you know about your risk factors, the more you can take steps to actually consciously correct, and look for ways in which you can kind of heal and repair your nervous system and that kind of thing. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that is really significant about this research. I think the other thing that I would put out there is that for many of us working on the front lines of human services or working with our coworkers, the behaviors that get in the way that we would notice in the office aren't clearly marked as these are trauma behaviors or these are the outcome of adverse childhood experiences. They're coded, right? So, for example, if someone comes into the office and they're highly distracted, they can't kind of focus when they're working with you, they keep looking at their phone or something like that, that's a coded behavior that speaks to their inability to kind of to stay present, to not dissociate, right? It's actually a symptom of a sort. If someone comes into your office and you do something or you tell them about some change and they immediately go off in a very emotionally, like they have an emotional outburst, right? And it seems disproportionate to the moment, and it doesn't make sense to you, that's a coded behavior, right? That's about something else that's not you. You just did something that activated it. So understanding that these things aren't necessarily about us and in the present moment, but they may in fact be about earlier experiences that lead to a kind of emotional disruption in the person's system. I think that's it. I think I've done the most I can do to remember what's in the video. What I'm going to ask you to do is to get into, if you wouldn't mind standing up and getting into groups of 3. And preferably people you haven't talked to yet today. We want to do a little bit of kind of cross-pollination as we go through today. So feel free to go to a different part of the room, connect up with 2 other people. Once you're all in groups of 3, I'll explain to you the next steps we're going to take. If anybody you're looking for a group, raise your hand and we'll figure out how to connect you up. Yeah, it looks like actually it works out perfectly. We got 4 groups of 3. So this is how it's going to work. Everybody in the group is going to have a role. We're going to go on a 12-minute walk precisely to discuss the questions. And then when you come back, to be prepared to report out. So I need one person in the group to be the timekeeper, and this, you get to use your phone for this. So you just have to have some way of keeping time. It could be your watch, it could be anything, but we'll synchronize right before you leave the room. For the walking dialogue, you get points if you go outside, because then you get fresh air, you get some sunshine, some vitamin D. It's not raining out. It's really pretty. It'd be a great thing. So we have a timekeeper in every group. Okay, good. The next person, I need one person to volunteer to be the question holder. All you have to do if you're the question holder is remember the question so your group can be focused. And I'll actually put the questions up here and you can take a picture if you want. So you don't even have to use memory. You just have to, again, you get to use your phone, which is oh so fun, as you know. So we have a question holder in every group? Those are the questions. All right. And then last person is going to be, let me go to the other screen. Ooping, the monitor. So I need, if you don't have a role yet, raise your hand. Okay, your role is to be the monitor. Your role is when your group comes back, you're going to evaluate your group on a scale of 1 to 5. How focused was the conversation? So if everybody just split up and went to get a snack, that would be a 1. But if everybody kind of stayed relatively focused and talked about the discussion, that could be a 4, 4.5, or a 5. So that's the monitor. So your monitors, are you all clear on what you're doing? Okay. All right. Oops. Those are the questions. Question holders, you got what you need? All right. I'm setting my clock for 12 minutes exactly. If your trio comes back late, I mean, not that I do this kind of thing, but it is what human beings do. Who would be to blame? Yes, it would be the timekeeper. So, all right, ready, timekeepers? All right, go. 12 minutes. How many folks noted any kind of positive shift pre and post the walking meeting? Raise your hand if you notice any positive shift. And you don't have to. There's no requirement. I mean, part of the challenge, I think, with this stuff is figuring out what are those things that work for you individually to reset your nervous system and get regrounded. Anybody want to say anything about what shifted for them about in terms of their energy, focus, or mood? What did you notice?
I would say I noticed just an increase in the overall energy and focus, just being in a different kind of space. And obviously it's a gorgeous day outside, so that would obviously help with the mood. But I've just been very intentional about why we were going outside to do what we were doing, and out of the normal space, I think helped. Yeah, good. Very good. So just noticing that, and one of the things that really wars against us as professionals is that we spend so much of our day sedentary, we spend so much of our day sitting, and that actually doesn't help our nervous system at all. In fact, it kind of like sends a message to your nervous system that you're trapped, or that you're confined or that you're constrained. And so when we physically move our bodies, we're actually resetting muscles, respiration, all those things that are connected to the nervous system. We'll talk about those in a second. Anybody else want to mention anything about that they noticed in terms of a shift? Or anybody want to say why it didn't work for them? I like hearing that too. All right. Now we get to hear from the monitors. If you were a monitor, raise your hand. All right. Could you give us an evaluation? How focused was your conversation as a trio? You see your scale there.
Our focus was really, we were focused really well. I'd say that we were a 5.
A 5.
We stayed on topic and we discussed amongst us and answered both questions, actually quite in depth a few times.
Possibly even more than a 5 if the scale went that high. Yes.
Maybe a 10.
Maybe a 10. Okay. All right. So we've set a very bold standard of excellence. Let's see where these other characters come in.
I'd say that we were a 5. There
Okay.
was constant flow of conversation, and everybody seemed to look at ease.
Okay.
And it was nice.
Nice. Excellent. All right. Who's other monitors?
I would say that we were probably a 5 too. We just talked about the questions. We didn't get off topic or anything.
Okay. All right. So it's a general standard of excellence. Not, do we hear from everyone? Oh, we got one more person, one more monitor.
Well, we were definitely a 5. We can't be anything less, because how can we with the others that were already 5s? I can't
That's right.
say that we
Who would want to be less in this group, right?
I would say even a little bit more than a 5, just because we enhanced our conversations with personal experiences that we've had in the workplace. So.
Nice. And it is very personal. This stuff is very personal. And we try not to take advantage of that, even though we say we're talking about clients and coworkers, we're also talking about ourselves and our own experience in the world. So thank you. Anything from your discussion that you want to share with the whole group? Any insights or observations that came out thinking about how this comes up in the work that you do? That would be actually helpful for me since I don't work in your field. So I would love to hear how it comes out typically in the work you do. Thank you. A bold soul.
We mentioned noticing when our coworkers might be stressed in an area and validating that they are stressed and being able to step in and support them in that stress without even saying, I know you're stressed, I'll just go ahead and take this next customer, but just being able to validate their experience and then knowing what's the next best thing to do for to support our coworker.
Yeah, even pausing for just a second and validating the person's experience of stress, emotional stress, and like that actually can be helpful to the person. Yeah.
And we've seen this come out with staff pretty regularly. It affects their attendance.
Yes.
It affects the relationships they have with coworkers and their ability to have patience in the work and the positive attitude to do the work we do with customers. So it doesn't even have to get to the customer. It manifests itself just with the relationships and within the office and how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Anything from this part of the room? Anybody want to share anything about how you notice it in the work you do? Like how Teresa walks over there to put pressure on them, but everybody's like, you're not our boss, Teresa. We don't have to talk if we don't want to. Okay. I wanted to put up here, a lot of, when I first started doing this work about 15 or so years ago, I always called it vicarious trauma. And in some ways that is not an accurate word anymore. It kind of presumes that you as the professional were kind of a blank slate, and then because you work with clients who have adversity or trauma in their lives, they kind of infected you, which isn't really a good way of thinking about it. I still put it up there because people still use that word. I really think it's more preferable to think about the fact that we work in environments, and this is not a reflection on the agency or the organization. If you do human services and you're working with multi-problem, crisis-prone clients who are coming to you for professional help because of their suffering, you're working in an environment of toxic stress. And when I say toxic stress, I really am just meaning a level of stress so overwhelming or strong that it can cause you to be physically sick. Physically sick. I mean, how many people, if you're willing to be honest, I can tell you, my first 10 to 15 years doing social work on the front lines, I was physically sick very often, most of the time, really, and camouflaging it and trying not to have people see it, but I was really struggling with different forms of illnesses, and all of them were stress-related illnesses, and no doctor I went to made a connection between the work I did and the physical conditions that I was struggling with. So do folks notice that? They notice the way it comes up physically for you? They're just two of you. Okay, that's good. Not good, but so we're gonna do a little bit of this will orient the whole way in which we actually a couple things I want to say is just think of it as a continuum where there's a whole range, almost like a community pool where there's a shallow end and a deep end, and that in terms of toxic stress, it may be just the really unpleasant days at the very, very shallow end. They don't really derail us that much. The vicarious trauma, when we're really affected by something a client says, it sticks with us, it has a residual impact on us. Adverse experiences are somewhere in the middle. They may or may not lead to trauma effects when we're little. Many people can identify that they had adverse experiences, but they don't really feel it affected their health in the long term. And that's because you had various resilience factors in your growing up. Maybe you had caretakers who knew the right thing to do. Maybe you went to a school where you were supported or something like that. But there was something that took the edge off of the experience. There's actual trauma itself, which is in its own category because it causes effects that last a long time until you get special help, right, or intervention or counseling. And then complex trauma is when you have multiple traumatic effects and just the symptoms go a lot deeper. Right, so if you think about it as a continuum, That's one way of coming to grasp. And they all affect our nervous system. They all affect our bodies. They all leave a residual impact. And yeah, I'll just say that. I think what I'm going to do actually, I think I'm going to skip around a little bit if you guys will be patient with me. I think I'm going to go, I'll come back to this. I'm going to talk a little bit about interpersonal neurobiology, just so we can kind of get grounded in the science. I try not to use really fancy academic words, but it's really hard not to talk about this one because it's the field that I'm drawing just about everything from. There are a couple. I'll try to break it down for you. You know, neurobiology is really the science of our nervous system, how it operates. Interpersonal neurobiology is the fact that our nervous systems are all invisibly networked with other people, right? So the longer all of us are in the same room together, the more we will begin to co-regulate. We will resonate with each other. Our heart rates will start to come into synchrony. We'll start to, and this happens in families, it happens in any group of people that spend long times together. You come into synchrony with each other. So it's interpersonal neurobiology. The children's brains develop through relationships. The human brain is a social, it's a social organ. So little kids, when they're first, they come into the world, if they have a caretaker who's able to be relatively sensitive to their needs, you know, who pays attention to them, who reassures them when they're distressed and all that kind of stuff, that helps with brain development. That helps them to then be able to have that capacity to self-regulate themselves, right? The other fancy word I'll toss out at you is called neuroception. And this is what our brains and bodies do in every environment we come into. We don't realize that we're doing this. We're doing it on an unconscious level. Any new environment you go into, any new person that you meet, you're assessing them to see, do I think they're safe? Do I think they're a safe person? So this is what your customers are doing too, right, when they come to see you. And actually, just think about your experience coming into the building today. Like, I'm new to this building today. I'm not really super familiar with Salem. Think about all the little micro interactions that you have to go through before you actually meet with the person who's going to give you help. You know, were you able to find parking? You know, were you able to figure out where the room was where you were going? Were people friendly to you when you came into the building? All these little micro interactions, they all set you up to have a certain experience, right? And neuroception is, did I feel safe? Did I feel reassured of my own safety in any situation? We get this. Neuroception operates viscerally, so it's a gut feeling. You walk into a room and you just have a gut feeling that this doesn't feel right. I don't think this is right. Something's wrong. You can't quite articulate it. You can't quite make it conscious, but you just feel it in your gut. That's neuroception. Also, if you walk into a place and you're like, this looks pretty good, I can be here, this looks like a pretty safe room, that's neuroception too. I've assessed it's a safe environment, I'm going to let myself relax and calm down. How many folks have ever seen this idea of the brain in your hand? Is that a new idea to folks? How many folks have teenagers or who have survived teenagers? Okay, so this is going to blow your mind. This is going to blow your mind. How many people currently have teenagers? We should talk afterwards. I have teenagers. I have 3 teenagers. So the brain in your hand comes from a book called Parenting from the Inside Out by Dan Siegel. So he's one of the big names in interpersonal neurobiology, like Nadine Burke-Harris. And Parenting from the Inside Out, if I were to reduce it to one sentence, it's explaining to parents the difference between their brain and their kid's brain, and how their kid's developing brain isn't going to act like their brain. And that most conflicts between parents and their adolescents are about us not understanding that their brains are still developing. Okay? So if you put your hand up like this, we're going to approximate the human brain. This would be your brain stem. If you fold your thumb over, you approximate a part of the brain called the limbic system, and it contains things like the hypothalamus, the amygdala, and other things that I can't remember right now. It's the threat center. It's the threat and reward center. It's the part. This is where neuroception begins. This is where we first notice threats. It's where the fight, flight, or freeze response comes from. right? So really intense emotions come from this part of our body. So when we're neurocepting, when we're noticing in the environment whether we're safe or not, that's this part of the brain. Okay, well, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a minute. If you fold your fingers over, you have the front part of your brain, which is the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of your brain. This is actually a uniquely human part of the brain. It is unique to humans. It is language, analysis, forethought, anticipating the consequences of our actions, sort of doing an assessment, right? So if you haven't had a lot of adverse experiences, your brain has developed relatively normally, there's going to be a kind of conversation between the limbic center and the prefrontal cortex, where information comes in through the limbic center, maybe a sense of threat. I'm uneasy about this person. I don't think this is right. I don't feel good about this. And then that information goes to the prefrontal cortex, where you then make an assessment. What am I going to do? What am I going to do with this situation? So I used to work in the criminal justice system as a counselor. And sometimes I would be sitting across from someone, and I would be so uncomfortable with that person. There was just some vibe they were giving. Maybe they were like staring at me really mean. Maybe they were refusing to talk. Maybe they were like crossing their body energy in a really tight way. And I would just feel this like powerful sense, like, I don't want to be here. This person does not want to be with me. This does not feel good. And if I was walking on the street, I might walk away from the person. If I was just a regular person and I wasn't in a professional role, I would walk away. But you can't do that when you're in the roles we're in. You have to help the people you're supposed to help with. So I have to sort of engage the prefrontal cortex, do a little self-talk, remind myself I've got skills, I've got strategies. This person is presenting this way because that's their job. That's what they do in the criminal justice system. They're supposed to be resistant or ambivalent about change, and I've got skills to deal with this, right? So that's when things are working really well. There's a conversation that happens between your limbic center, where you feel a sense of threat, and your prefrontal cortex, where you make a conscious decision about what to do, right? So the science shows that there's a 3 to 5 second window between when we perceive a threat in the environment and when we make a decision what to do. Right? And so for those of us who do counseling with trauma survivors, we know that they don't believe that. And actually, teenagers don't believe that either. They think, a reward or a threat comes into my awareness and I do it. I just do it right away. There's no reflection, and that's because that brain development hasn't fully solidified yet. The limbic center is always on if you're awake. It is always on. The prefrontal cortex fatigues very easily, right? It fatigues very easily. So all this emphasis in workplaces these days about self-care, taking care of yourself while you do stressful work, is really about taking care of the prefrontal cortex so that it stays engaged and your decision-making has a certain quality to it, right? When you get really fatigued as the day goes on, as different experiences happen and they wear you down, the prefrontal cortex goes offline, and then we're more apt to deal with stressors from a place of fight or flight or freeze. Right? Has folks heard that idea before, fight, flight, or freeze? Yeah. So the limbic center, when it thinks you're really truly under threat, it sends a message to the rest of your body, okay, it's time to mobilize, it's time to get into fight mode, it's time to freeze, or it's time to run like hell. It's important to remember that the limbic center, it primarily notices threats first, but it also notices rewards, right? So you come into a room at a training, and the first thing you notice that, am I physically and emotionally safe in this room? And then the second thing is, is there good coffee? Are there good pastries? Yeah, are there nice looking people? So the rewards. But it's always threats first. And that's sort of important to understand if you work with a group of human beings, that we have what's called a negativity bias, which is we go to the negative place first because of survival. It's evolutionarily programmed that you have to notice threats first. So in the workplace, that's why it's important, if you're in a leadership position, to continually remind people, okay, let's keep it positive, or let's look at ourselves. Let's be intentional about how we carry ourselves. Let me check the time real quick. I'm going for. Can folks do one more thing before we go to break? Okay. I'm going to actually skip around again. I think it makes more sense to do this. Bring. All right, so what we're going to do is again, this is a voluntary activity, but it's another strategy that you can use to reset your nervous system. And it's going to involve some meditation and some sort of physical awareness activities. Totally voluntary. If you don't want to do it, you're welcome to just observe. But before we do that, if you all would not mind doing another self-reflection scale again. So it's like a little bit after 10 on a Monday morning. Where are you at right now in terms of your energy, your focus, and your mood? Take 1 minute to do a quick assessment, and then we'll shift into this. So this is actually a very painless experience if you kind of go, trust me and go with it for a second. And I'll explain a little bit of how the backstage, how it works afterwards. But if you want to get full benefit of this, if you can make sure that both feet are on the ground, fully grounded, hands either folded in your lap or by your side, you're sending a very clear message to your body, I'm relaxing. Okay? I'm going to make sure that you're sitting back in your chair and your spine is relatively erect. Because we're going to be focusing on what's going on inside of our body, if you can lower your gaze or close your eyes, that shuts out awareness of some of the distraction in the environment. When you start any meditation with a focus on our breathing, and it should be a particular type of breathing, very deep and slow. You want to take a full 6 seconds to fill your body with air, and then 4 to 6 seconds to do a gradual release. And you want to use this as an opportunity to train your attention to just focus on the physical sensation of breathing. The slow, intentional breathing. It is very normal and common when people are doing this to have different worries and anxieties and thoughts intrude. And you can notice those when they occur, and then try to bring your attention back to the physical experience of just breathing. We're going to visit 3 touch points in our body where we know human beings unconsciously store stress. And the first one is our jaw. So to check in with your jaw, I'm going to invite you to kind of open your mouth and maybe move it up and down or from side to side very slowly. You're just checking for the presence of tightness, anxiety, anything you might be holding there that you really don't need today. And if you notice that you're holding something in your jaw, you can actually give yourself conscious permission to let it soften and relax. And then bring your attention back to your breathing. Give yourself that full 6 seconds to fill your body with air. And then another 6 seconds, the just slow release of all the air. The next part of our body that we're going to visit is our neck. And you can do this by gently nodding or moving your head from side to side slowly. And if you can even do a gentle head roll. And really take your time with this, no rush. You're just kind of checking in with this part of your body. Are you holding something here that you don't need? Has something crept in there when you weren't expecting or intending? And if you do notice tightness in this part of your body, you can give yourself conscious permission to let it soften and relax. And then come back to your slow, intentional breathing. The third and final part of our body that we're going to check in with is our shoulder area. And if you spend any time at all at a desk, you are holding stuff in your shoulders. It is a verifiable truth. So we're going to test this part of our body by doing a gentle shrug. Where you bring your shoulders close to your ears and let it go. Or you can do, if you can do a shoulder roll. Where you do like a little circles. And again, you're sort of testing out and seeing, am I holding something here that I don't need, that I want to let go of? And if you notice tightness in this part of your body, you can give yourself permission to let it soften and relax. And then come back to your breathing. The final thing we're going to do before we open our eyes is I'm going to invite you to, in your mind's eye, to imagine a safe place or a safe person. This could be from your current present day moment, or it could be from a time in your past. It could be a much loved caregiver or teacher. Could be a safe room in your childhood house. Could be a vacation place you've gone, like a hike in the woods, a walk by the ocean. Could be a partner or a spouse. Whatever came to your mind first when I said the word safe place, safe person. And when you get that in your mind's eye, try to focus on some of the details. Really get a clear picture of that person or place. What does it look like? What does it smell like? What does it sound like? What are the qualities that cued you that you were in a safe place where you could trust? Where you were okay? Where you were enough? And then for one final half minute, we're going to come back to our breathing. Focus on those long, intentional breaths. when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Come back into the present moment. And before we go to the discussion we're going to have, if you wouldn't mind doing another self-reflection scale, what did you notice, and any shift that you noticed in your energy, your focus, or your mood pre and post doing the meditation exercise? And we'll take a minute to do that. Just out of curiosity, anybody notice any difference? Again, we're sort of seeing what works for different people, for what works for me or doesn't work for me. Pre and post meditation. Okay. Anybody fall asleep? We're sorry about that. It doesn't work for everybody, you know. Sometimes it's better in the mid to late afternoon. So. All right, we're gonna do one last short 5-6 minute discussion just in the people in your immediate environment. Share just to the extent that you feel comfortable. What's one characteristic of that safe place or safe person that you feel comfortable sharing? How do you create a sense of safety within your team or your workplace? That's the other really big thing. How do you do that? How do you bring that back into the workplace? We'll just take about 5 or 6 minutes to do that. We'll report out, then we'll go to our mid-morning break. All right, if folks wouldn't mind wrapping up the small group discussions. We have just about a few minutes before we go to break, and I would just be curious to hear any insights or observations that came up for you in the small group discussion related to safety, you know, how that translates into the workplace, how you experience in the workplace or not. Any insights come up for folks or questions?
It was good that you pointed it out. In my safe place, it had me completely out and away with nobody within miles. And I thought that was interesting. I never thought of it as, you know, because I have family and kids, you know, the whole thing. So that was interesting to me that would be what it was. Very hard to replicate in the work environment.
Yeah,
other than headphones. But anyway, interesting.
Our bosses don't often tell us, you know, go out and have a walk along the ocean and, you know, work on that task I just gave you. You know, no, it's true. Anybody else want to share anything about what they noticed about their safe place or safety in the office or in the workplace? Right behind you, Teresa.
My safe place was kind of the same thing. It was out in the hills, away from everybody, and within the office, it was kind of, my sense of safety was in my cubicle alone with the headphones on. But having recently transitioned from one position to another, talking about creating a sense of safety within the team, as I was thinking about that, the neat thing about the team that I work with is it seems like that comes naturally with the team that I work with. And that's nice. One thing that I've always liked, because I've been in a different unit within the same office, and it's always been that way for the 5 years that I've been there. And that's not always been that way with other organizations that I've worked for. So that's been kind of neat to see.
Yeah, so just like lucking into, you know, some of us land in teams where they've really got a high degree of communication and trust and cohesion, and you just feel that, and that sense of safety is, that communicates a sense of reassurance and safety. Yeah, that's great. Any other comments on this one? Or insights that came up for you? Yeah.
So a characteristic of my safe place was, let's see if I can put it into words, was the right to feel safe. Just no matter where I went, I needed the right to feel safe. And that not be questioned, or that not be, or I didn't have to explain it to get people to agree.
You have to justify it, rationalize it.
Just
it is
the right
given.
to be safe, to feel safe.
Right.
And if I said I was unsafe, and then that being okay.
Yeah, that people are listening to you. They validate that you don't, that it's not working for you. Yeah, yeah. No, I appreciate that. One of the interesting things, talking about this with lots of different groups of people that really always strikes me is how diverse it is what people need to feel safe. Some people want to be around other people. Some people want to be with one specific person. Some people don't want to be with anybody. Many people want to just be with their dog. So, it's just very, very interesting. Some people want an environment where there's white noise or there's music or there's some kind of stimulation. And some people want nothing. They want an absolute lack of noise and stimulus, right? It's very diverse, and it's an interesting thing to reflect on, that we just don't know when we're working with someone, especially if they seem agitated. We don't know what they need to feel safe. And we don't know if they are or aren't feeling safe. And we very rarely ask about safety. I don't know if you ever ask about safety. I know for the longest time when I first came into the field, the helping professions, and I was sitting across someone from agitated, it never occurred to me to make it explicit. Are you feeling okay right now? Are you feeling safe here? What can I do to help you feel safer here? What can I do to help you feel more comfortable here? It's important you feel comfortable for us to do the work we need to do. Yeah, were you going to share something?
Yeah, for employment department, we kind of have looked at things, in two ways, I guess, as a manager. So I manage centers out in the field with workforce operations. So we look at things at kind of the physical safety and then the emotional safety. And manager's job is to kind of tune into both of those. And the physical safety is somewhat sometimes the easier thing.
Right.
To address. We have safety committees, we have safety procedures in our centers, but the emotional safety is another thing that's a little bit harder. And so listening and just being supportive, I think, is the key to kind of helping with that.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, you just gave me my segue into the afternoon section. It's like, because the human brain is social and it is tribally oriented, the thing that most can restore and reassure a sense of safety is a social connection with other people, right? And or a safe social connection with other people where we feel comfortable with them, we feel reassured that they're an okay person. So one of the things that often works that people identify when we go on the walking dialogue is people say, well, it's not just that I was walking, so I was resetting my muscles. It's not just that I was getting fresh air, vitamin D, sunshine, but also I was in a sort of an intimate conversation with other people, and there's something kind of reassuring and nice about that for many people, not for everybody, but for many people. The social engagement is actually one of the things that helps us to reset our nervous system. And being attentive to that, right? I mean, I don't know if anybody's had the experience of working in a kind of like emotionally chilly workplace where people just don't say anything to each other, they don't acknowledge each other, they don't say hello, they don't do anything fun ever. That sends a message too, and it's not one that's like, warm and fuzzy. Yeah. Any other comments? Oh, we have one more over here. Over here, Teresa.
So I guess for me, one of the biggest things for feeling safe is giving people benefit of the doubt. I don't think enough people do that because most of the time, if you take something the wrong way, it's not meant that way. You just took it that way. And if you can reset yourself and say, oh, okay, I doubt they meant it that way, it's going to be safer for you and it's going to be safer for them.
Right. So, kind of moving through the world with a sense of grace. And also, giving people the benefit of the doubt, maybe checking in with people about their intentions and being clear with them about what the impact on you was, that kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. Let me check the time real quick. It is 10:34, so I'm going to set my timer for exactly 15 minutes. I want to invite folks before you go to break to do something intentionally nice for yourself, actually use it as a break. You could just look at your cell phone and answer work emails, or you could actually do another walk or get something, a replenishing beverage or something like that. So we'll have 15 minutes, and for the folks who are back punctually at 15 minutes, there will be a hilariously funny video. How many folks here have already been on the whatever vacation they're going to take this summer? How many folks are still have it in the future? They're looking forward to going on some kind of vacation. How many folks have or did or have a vacation that's like a special vacation? Like it's like you really worked too hard for it. It took a lot of planning, that kind of thing. Anybody? It's like a special one. So this is a quick video to just kind of help make sure that you have your vacation expectations in the right place. A little bit from Saturday Night Live. Oops.
Spaghetti. Culture. History. Spaghetti. These are the things of a boot country called Italia. Hello, I'm Joe Romano of Romano Tours. For 2 generations, my family has provided high-quality tours of Italy to people from all over the world, but mostly Long Island and Jersey.
We saw all of Italy in a bus, okay? We ate every day. Incredible.
Yeah, I got to look at the Pope, and he even told me happy birthday. Thanks
Romano Tours.
Explore the old country with our award-winning 10-day vacation packages. See Venice, the city of wetness. Point and laugh at the Tower of Pisa. And play with some dough in Napoli. People love us, but every so often a customer leaves a review that they were disappointed or didn't have as much fun as they thought. So here at Romano Tours, we always remind our customers, if you're sad now, you might still feel sad there, okay? You understand? That makes sense? Our tours will take you to the most beautiful places on Earth. Hike the cliffs of the Amalfi Coast. Fish with the nets in Sorrento. Do this, I don't know. But remember, you're still gonna be you on vacation. If you are sad where you are, and then you get on a plane to Italy, the you in Italy will be the same sad you from before, just in a new place. Does that make sense? There's a lot a vacation can do. Help you unwind, see some different looking squirrels. But it cannot fix deeper issues, like how you behave in group settings, or your general baseline mood. That's a job for incremental lifestyle changes sustained over time. I want to be very clear about what we can do for you. We can take you on a hike. We cannot turn you into someone who likes hiking. We can take you to the Italian Riviera. We cannot make you feel comfortable in a bathing suit. We can provide the zip line. We cannot give you the ability to say we and mean it. You're not your sister. We can provide you with a wine tasting tour of Tuscany. We cannot change why you drink or the person you become when you do, okay? I'm sorry, but it's true. And our friendly tour guides are happy to take your picture. But remember, the pictures you're in are gonna have you in them. And if you don't like how you look back home, it's not gonna get any better on a gondola.
Right before we went in the Vatican, he took my face in his hands and he said, if you feel bad about yourself in a church back home, the Vatican is 100% wall-to-wall church.
Mm-hmm. So we went for 20 minutes, and then we went back to the hotel and watched Paddington 2.
Yeah, the best.
Love the Vatican.
This may sound rude, but I'm trying to temper expectations. I hate seeing people beat themselves up on my tours. It really gets to me. And please, if you and your partner are having trouble connecting, we guarantee our tour will not help. If you don't want to touch each other at home, be reminded, in Italy, you will have those same bodies and thoughts. You're not blindfold strawberry eaters in Mamaroneck. Why start in Sicily? Look, a day is a long time to feel happy, for all of it. Most of us get 45 minutes, if we're lucky. And that's our motto at Romano Tours.
Romano Tours. We make memories, not miracles.
Most of us get 45 minutes if we're lucky. So, you know, be alert to when your 45 minutes happens for you today. Were there any, I It looks, I'm not even going to say it. I'm not going to even mention the internet, so I won't say it because I'll jinx it. Were there any questions or comments that came up for you during the break? Anything you want to mention before we move on to some additional material? All right. We're gonna talk a little bit. So one of the things I mentioned is that the human brain is a social brain. It is built on connections to each other. We're actually gonna break down the nervous system into its component parts in a second. But first, I want us to get us thinking about empathy and how empathy works in relationships, the way in which it works, especially if you're working with coworkers or customers who are in a state of distress or overwhelm, or they're really struggling. So we're gonna watch a quick video. It's like 3 minutes long. These are the questions I want you to sort of be thinking about or keep in mind as you watch this. How are the qualities of empathy relevant to being trauma-informed? Do you ever make vulnerable choices in your work? And they'll explain what they mean by that. How does judgment interfere with empathy? How many folks anybody seen this clip from Brené Brown? Just one person? Okay.
Very different than sympathy.
Let me,
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
All right, so again, sort of in groups of 3 or 4, the people in your immediate vicinity for about 6 minutes, just to debrief on these 3 questions. How are the qualities of empathy relevant to what we're talking about today? Do we make vulnerable choices in our own work? And how does judgment interfere? And maybe if you even specifically think about how does judgment potentially come up in the work you do with coworkers or customers. We'll take about 6 or 7 minutes for that, and then I'll ask for a report out. All right, let's wrap up the small group discussion. I'd be just curious just to hear, again, I'm really curious about the kind of work that you do in your agency and the ways in which some of these issues, safety, empathy, come up in the work you're doing. What came up, what observations or insights came up in your discussion that you want to surface for the whole group?
I think we were talking about how we can use empathy to help our customers, help make the conversations with them more efficient, more productive, from a framework of empathy, get them the services that they need.
Can you actually share, is there anything specific that came to mind that was kind of empathy driven or anything like that, like a specific tool or strategy that you use? Don't mean to put pressure on you. I was just really curious. I'm trying to understand how you work with folks.
I don't think we came up with sort of like the solution or the plan, but it was more about how can we use empathy to connect with them, especially if we have experience, knowing where they're going to go.
Yeah.
Help them get there maybe faster, so we can, give them the services that they need. And some of the things that you mentioned earlier, asking do you feel safe? So we're thinking, do you feel prepared? And maybe if they're not feeling prepared for the next step they have to do, they'll come out quicker and say what they feel that they're missing. Sort of get that up front, and you can help them sooner.
Yeah. I think that one of the things that she kind of underscores in that short video clip is that it's okay just to be with people and not necessarily solve every problem they've got. And I think anybody who does human services, we're in this position where we're often working with people who come to us and they've got a dozen different things that are going wrong, right? And we really know that realistically, we maybe are helping them with one or two. And the pressure of that, I think, is one of the things that leads us sometimes to make pat, judgments and things like that, things that get in the way of actually, but there's actually a value in just being able to be with people. Just being able to empathize, say, I don't know what to do right now, but I'm glad you told me. I wish I could be more helpful. I'm rooting for you. I want to be there as a supporter of you, that kind of thing. But the people have to work out their own situations at the end of the day. Yeah.
Is that all right if I comment off Nick's comment?
Please.
I was just going to say I really appreciate how Nick was commenting that these learning around empathy can help us be more efficient with our customers, because I think a lot of people don't make that connection.
Yes.
They think it's going to be faster if we're just boom, boom, boom. And so I love that you were able to make the connection that this can actually help us have more efficient conversations, because it's not always intuitive.
Yeah, and everything we do happens because the relationship works. So the relationship facilitates everything happening. We're not just handing people paper, we're not just kind of handing them a solution. It happens because the relationship works, and so we have to attend to the quality of the relationship. Are we communicating respect, empathy, support? Are we being present? Are we fully there? Yeah. Any other comments or any other insights that came up for you? Get two over here.
One of the things we had discussed about vulnerable choices is sometimes you have customers who you work with who will, the last part of an hour meeting, the last 5 minutes will kind of, drop the bomb on you, so to say.
Yes.
And part of that being vulnerable is maybe when you meet with the next time is, hey, last time you said this, what can we do now to talk about that or approach this?
Perfect, yes.
So that you basically, efficiency is so you don't waste time, basically, so you can best serve that customer.
Yeah. And what do you say when they drop the bomb and realistically, I have 5 minutes for you? like to be respectful and empathic, but also to, you want to respect the time for the next person who's coming after them, right? So, let's come back to this the next time we meet. I hope that we can come back to this. I'm glad you told me, maybe not in the last 5 minutes next time, but, let's start with this the next time you come. Yeah. We had a comment here?
Ours was about vulnerable choices as well, and we do make vulnerable choices when we're willing to share things about ourselves to make that connection with that customer so that they feel like they can trust us. You're getting down at their level so they understand, I can trust this person, I can talk to this person, because some of the stuff they have to talk to us about is so personal. They have to trust us. In order for us to help them, we need to know what we're dealing with.
Super helpful that you put that out there. And you know, I think that it's really, we need to constantly remind ourselves that for someone coming in and just meeting us for the first time, we represent the government. We're not ourselves. We represent the government. And the vast majority, so many people in the world, do not have helpful experiences of government, and in fact may even experience government as a destructive and harmful force, so that they've already come in with a preset conception of who and what we are and what we could do to them. We're just a representative of a larger system. So when we make those kind of strategic choices, and it's not like you want to overtake the time with, oh, let me tell you about me, you know, but it's really thinking strategically, how do I put a dose of my own humanness into a relationship to kind of neutralize the threat that I might otherwise represent for this person? How do I soften the edges of this encounter so that they don't just think they're talking to some bureaucrat that doesn't care about them? Because again, communicating caring, it's not like you have to take the person home, but communicating caring is going to facilitate the relationship being more effective and the person getting what they need from it. That was an awesome comment. Thank you. Any other comments on that or on any of this before we all right. Let's talk about, let me just check my time, make sure I'm doing okay. Let's talk about self-regulation. And what it is and where it comes from. So this is really getting into that conversation about how our nervous systems work. People in the human services, man, the work we do is so hard. It takes such a physical and psychological toll on us. Whether or not we realize it, it does. If you're working with distressed people, and it sounds to me from the work of your organization that is what you're doing, you're working with largely distressed people, it's going to take a physical, psychological, emotional, and spiritual toll on you in a way that's very different than if you had made a career choice to go into information technology or business or something like that. You guys are doing very, very human work. I want to talk a little bit about where our nervous system comes from. You know, how do we understand our nervous system? It's really, really fascinating, and I tend to geek out on this stuff a little bit, so I'll try not to like spend too long talking about it, but it's endlessly fascinating to me. Our human nervous system connects us to all the creatures who have ever inhabited the planet Earth. From the very earliest slippery fish that were in the oceans, to the bony reptiles and amphibians, to other mammals, and to human beings. And the story of the nervous system is actually the story of evolution. It's about how our bodies are equipped to help us deal with a dangerous, uncertain world and to try to ensure our survival, right? And so if you start with the earliest creatures, the only way they had of dealing with danger in the environment was to freeze, was to shut down, right? It was a very simple, but sometimes effective mechanism. So two things that the freeze response does. On the one hand, if you're exposed to a predator and you freeze, they may think you're dead already and leave you alone. It's like faking your death, right? On the other hand, if they're going to devour you anyway, the immobilization response prepares your body to shut down for death. It's actually, our nervous system is programmed to help us. When it's time for us to die, it's programmed to help us to die. So that's the immobility or shutdown response. And some creatures, that's all they got in terms of a nervous system, right? We have this too. We have this in our limbic system. This is one of the things on the menu that we can when we're dealing with a stressful or dangerous environment. As the species diversified and differentiated, the nervous system became more complex too. So then you get into the bony fish and the amphibians and the reptiles. They developed two more ways of responding to danger in the environment. They could fight, they could mobilize to have a more aggressive response where they fight back, or they could mobilize and get the hell out of there. They could run, right? That's a very different response. So when we go in, when the limbic system cues us to go into fight or flight mode, it also activates certain chemical and hormones in our bodies that kind of make us focus on survival. It gives us a boost of energy that all that we care about is surviving and either fighting or flighting, fight or flight. Right? So we also have that on the menu of our repertoire. And again, these are all the things that are in the back, the oldest part of our brain, the limbic system. So then you evolve into mammals. And then it gets really, really interesting because then the nervous system branches out, and it's not just the things that are in our body, it's also our connections to other people. Remember, the thing that protected human beings from an evolutionary perspective, the thing that gave us an advantage when the species was evolving was that we roamed together in groups. And we relied on other people to keep us safe. So if some people were sleeping, other people could be keeping watch. If some people were hunting and gathering, other people could be home taking care of the kids. There was sort of a democratic, social, collaborative cooperation that was kind of built into how we networked with each other. It also meant that our brains were socially programmed, that we developed through attachments with other people. Ideally, when we're little, we have exposure to good caregivers who help us to learn the capacity for self-regulation. But if that doesn't happen, maybe later in life, we have healthy, supportive relationships that allow us to evolve that capacity for social engagement. And remember, many of our clients, if they've had serious adversity in their background, they may not do that very well. That may have been disruptive as their brains were developing. They may come in with a chip on their shoulder. They may be quite defended. I think somebody recently said that for many folks who've survived trauma, the habits of protection are stronger than the habits of connection, which is the social engagement stuff, right? Human beings take it a step further because we can put the story of adversity, we can put our experiences of adversity into a story, into language, which then can evolve. So we can actually change our perspective and our perception about what happened to us in the past in a way that it can kind of evolve, get integrated, and not be something that's kind of so damaging to us throughout the lifetime. So let me tell you a little story about this. All right, so brace yourself. Everybody braced? Okay. There he is. This is my dog, Sydney, little rescue dog. How many folks in this room have a dog? How many folks in this room have a rescue dog? You may relate to this story. We've had Sydney, I think we've had Sydney 4 or 5 years now. We got him from a rescue shelter. After he'd been with us for a mere 3 days, he bit me in the face, and I had to go to the emergency room, and I had to get a couple stitches. Hello. So. My children know that what I do for a living is I work with trauma. I teach about trauma and I work with people who have trauma in their backgrounds. And so Sydney became my little project, my little lab experiment in mammalian trauma recovery. My kids call him my little trauma survivor. Now you may be looking at him, looking at that cute little face, thinking, wait a minute, I feel like I've seen him before. I feel like I recognize him, like he might be some kind of celebrity dog. And in fact, you're right, he is. A couple years ago, Oregonian did a My Dog's Face competition. We entered Sydney's face, and he went into the competition. He got all the way to round 32. So the way this worked is every day, 2 dogs' faces would face off, and people would vote online for which dog they thought was cuter, right? And then one dog would win at the end, and you got some like magnificent gift coupon to a pet store. And because of everything that poor little Sydney had been through, we kind of thought, my kids and I thought that like if only he could win a beauty contest, that would kind of help him in his healing, that it would make it better. We also discovered that the way the voting was set up, you could actually cheat. So if you really, really wanted your dog to win, you could vote from multiple devices. So you could vote from your home computer in the morning, your iPhone device. You could go to the library and vote from all 5 computers sequentially. And then you could mobilize your whole social network to do the same thing so that your dog could win the damn contest. We really wanted him to win. And then he didn't. Tegan, little corgi puppy. Seems so unfair to put Sydney against Tegan, but Tegan won the day. When I first got Sydney, Sydney's the first dog I've ever owned in my life. I thought I was going to have a certain kind of dog owner's life. I had this stereotype in my mind about what dog owners were like. I always saw them in dog parks, clustered together, socializing while their animals were socializing and playing together. So I thought, I'm going to have all these new friends. This is going to be awesome, right? But then I would be out walking Sydney in my neighborhood, and if another dog owner and their dog was coming towards me, as they got closer, they would cross the street, almost as if they were avoiding me. And I was like, what the hell? What's wrong with us? What's wrong with Sydney? And it was very odd, and it was very perplexing. But then I started to figure it out, because once, as I was walking Sydney on the street, a man was coming towards us, and when he got within 5 feet of us, something went off. A bomb went off inside of Sydney's head, and he very aggressively lunged for the man and snarled and barked and tried to bite him. And then I kind of started to understand that Sydney, because of his background, because of what he'd been through, we knew he'd had several different owners before us. We knew that there had been a man who had been physically abusive with him, that's why he'd been taken away. We started to understand that, okay, so he's got some problems with self-regulation, with reactivity. He's a very reactive dog. And so I started to understand this is why people avoid us. Because as I would be walking and I would see other dogs coming towards us and men or adolescent boys coming towards us, then I was the one who was crossing the street to keep Sydney from reacting and getting triggered. We don't really know what happened to him exactly. We know a few things, but we know he was abused by a man. We know he's had a lot of disrupted attachment, so it's really hard on the particular breed that he is. And you know, as somebody who works as a therapist with trauma survivors, I know that there are things we can do to help him get better a little bit, right? Like, these are some of the things we do. We keep him away from the things that trigger him. Like, we have become familiar with what triggers him. So other dogs, adolescent boys and men, squirrels, surprises, smiling. So if we keep him away from all those 5 things, then he generally will be okay. He's generally going to manage his mood okay. We keep him kind of home, mostly at home, away from other dogs. He's got a pretty self-contained life. He does have this dog socialization group he goes to where they put different colored kerchiefs around the dog's necks depending on how reactive they are, which I can't imagine what that does to their self-esteem, but that's what they do. He's got a pretty steady and boring routine, but it's only ever going to get so good. That's the thing with mammals. It's only going to get so good because he doesn't have the prefrontal cortex in the way that we does. He doesn't have language. He can't put his experience into story. And story is what helps it to transform. That's what we do if we go to therapy or to counseling. We tell the story of what happens to us. And when someone responds compassionately with empathy, the story shifts. We might start to tell the story differently, and it becomes a little bit more kind of a healing experience. So yeah, his capacity, because he's a mammal but not a human, his capacity to heal is limited by the limitations of the mammalian brain. The trauma is always going to be there to a certain extent. And I'm sort of sharing this story to sort of set up the ways in which human beings are different, the way in which human beings can go in a different place. So he's always going to be a little reactive dog. And in fact, the whole neighborhood is reactive. We're like the neighborhood of traumatized dogs. And in fact, Oregon is the state of traumatized dogs because we have the highest adoption rate for rescue animals in the whole country. Did you guys know that? It's very, very high. So that's why you got all these people who have reactive dogs avoiding each other. It's very different. He's still really cute, though. I think you'll agree, right? He's still kind of a cute dog. So looks are something. Let's talk a little bit more specifically about the nervous system. So sometimes I like to sort of find metaphors to think about how the nervous system works. Remember we talked about the freeze response, the fight or flight response, the social engagement response, and then story, right? All those levels, and that's what makes our human nervous system work, is that we have recourse to all those things. Now remember, some of the things that are higher up in the hierarchy may not work so well for us if we've had a lot of adversity and if our brains haven't developed in a healthy environment. But that doesn't mean that they can't still. One metaphor for thinking about all those different things is a car metaphor, where the freeze response is the brakes, the fight or flight response is the accelerator that charges us into the environment, right? The driver, noticing the environment, being alert to all the dangers and all the different things going on around, is the social engagement system, right? And so when you think about how we move through the world on any daily, it's a combination of braking, accelerating, and noticing what's going on around us. You know, we're sort of going all between those different things, and that's what enables us generally to be successful. Another way of thinking about, another metaphor that I like is this idea of how many, and we have any folks here who practice any kind of yoga? Any yoga practitioners? 2 people? So Savasana is one of the poses in yoga. That's when people lay completely still. It's also known as death pose. And it's sort of like, is a replication of the freeze response where you're just kind of in a place of complete stillness, and it helps the body to sort of like regenerate after you've been doing some really tough poses. And when I was learning about interpersonal neurobiology, I was also getting kind of deeper into my own yoga practice, and it was kind of helpful for me to understand from a physical perspective how in any day we go back and forth between sort of action-oriented fight or flight postures and rest postures, and that you're going back and forth, and that you start to recognize in your own body, what does it feel like when I'm in a mobilized place? What does it feel like when I'm resting and quiet and still? And that ability to control intentionally going back and forth really helped me understand some of these scientific ideas. All right, we're going to do one more activity. And if folks, let's see, where are we in time? It is 11:28, so we are about 32 minutes from lunch. Let's do a little self-reflection. Where are you at now in terms of your energy, your focus, and your mood? Take 1 minute to privately figure this out, and then we'll start the last experiential activity. All right. So if you're willing to join me, we're gonna do some quick stretches that are sort of office-based yoga you can do. So this is going to take a very short amount of time, and it's totally voluntary, but these are things you can do when you're in the office or when you're in the field to help you reset when your nervous system is getting activated, okay? Remember, all the things we do for stress management, the most effective things we can do are from the body up. It's not about making a different meaning out of things. It's starting with the body and checking in with our body. Is our body in a good place? So if you wouldn't mind standing up, we're just going to do a couple quick poses. And do this to your level of comfort. Don't do anything that hurts, and don't forget to continue to breathe. People forget to breathe sometimes. You want your feet to be below you for this first posture. Just feel solid, like they're pretty much in line with your hips. And then we're just going to make a tower. We're just going to make a tower. Have your palms touching above your head to the extent that you can. And then try to touch the ceiling. Just stretch up. You're reminding yourself now that you have a spine. Your spine's like, whoa, I thought you forgot about me. Don't forget to breathe. And keep your hands there. You might want to put your feet a little bit closer. And we're going to do half moon, which means you're just going to very gently tilt to one side, just until you feel like a little stretch on the opposite side. Shouldn't hurt. It should just feel like a good stretch, like your muscles are like, whoa, I thought you forgot about me. And ideally, you want your breathing to be kind of like your breathing when we were meditating. Deep, intentional, slow. And then come back up to tower. And then we're going to go to the other side. So do half moon from the other side. You should feel that same gentle stretch on the other side. And then come back up to that tower pose again. You want to reach up again. See if you can touch. And then we're going to do a backward bend. So you're going to put your head back to the extent that you can. And if your arms can follow so that they're pointing towards the back wall, you can do that. It shouldn't hurt. You want it to just feel a gentle stretch. You should feel this in your lower back. When you do that inhale, you can sometimes get a little bit deeper. And then go back up to tower. The next one we're going to do is called ragdoll. It's really easy. Just follow gravity and then very gradually just bend over and let your arms go completely limp, your head go completely limp. You can even shake it out a little bit. You can soften your knees if that helps. You're cueing your muscles to completely let go of any tension with this one. That tension just creeps in, and when we do this, we are sort of intentionally saying, you know what, I'm in charge of my body, and I'm going to let you relax. And then gradually come back up to a standing posture, okay? And then the next two postures, we have to be sitting down. So these are just two gentle spine twists. So you want to be sitting in your seat. You want to have your feet sort of aligned with your hips. You want your spine to be erect. You want to be breathing regularly. And then you want to gradually creep over, do a gentle spine twist, and see if you can hold on to the back of your chair with the opposite arm, which I absolutely cannot do, but it's an aspiration. You want to keep taking deep breaths. See if you can get a little deeper. See if you can get a little farther. Should feel a good twist. Then slowly come back to center again. And then we're going to go to the other side and see if you can reach the back of the chair with the other arm. Make sure you keep your spine vertical. Deep breaths. See if you can get a little deeper. And then come back to center again. The last posture that we're going to do is actually not a yoga posture. I saw it on a TED Talk by Amy Cuddy. Has anyone seen the Amy Cuddy thing on power postures? This is what you're supposed to do before you do a job interview. So the next time you do a job interview, you're going to do this pose and you're going to get that job. And this is how it works. So it's kind of a CEO pose. So get in your chair. Put your hands behind your neck, your head like this. Kick back a little bit. If you're able to, you really get full benefit of this posture if you can put your feet up like you're a CEO in charge of a huge corporation. You have all these little minions who work for you, who bring you your coffee, your ice water, maybe a little bud vase on your desk. You know, all these people take care of you. You're in charge of the world when you're in this position. And then gradually come out of it. And we've gotten through the series, and let's do a real quick self-reflection scale. Again, go back to energy, focus, and mood. Did anything shift between before and after doing a little bit of stretching? Anybody notice anything? Couple people. What are some of the things that you noticed that worked for you or didn't work for you? Can anybody share anything?
It improved.
I don't know what it is, but my energy is like increased. So I feel like loose. Yeah, you renewed your energy. So if you're interested in this whole concept of energy renewal, if you want to Google, this is the name of the article. It's such a good article. I share this with people all the time. It appeared in the Harvard Business Review. It's called Manage Your Energy, Not Your Time. Okay? Because there's this weird idea we have in this country that time management is about the efficient use of the minute-to-minute progression of the day, which is false. Because the number of minutes in the day is finite. It doesn't, but the thing is, the thing that really makes work powerful and potent is if we bring a certain amount of energy to it, right? So what we just did is we renewed our energy by resetting our nervous system. When you renew your energy, you manage your energy, not your time. So I don't know if you have this experience, but I often will start the day with such noble and pure ambitions for self-care. I will bring my running shoes and my running gear to work, and I'll be like, at lunch, I'm going to go and I'm going to take a run, and that's going to be the beautiful thing I do for myself. And then work happens, right? Stressors start to build up.
my fight, flight, or freeze system starts to get activated as the day is going by. And then as that happens, your body starts to get infused with things like adrenaline and cortisol and all the different hormones that keep you in freeze, fight, or flight, right? The way I know this is that it comes to me through different rationalizations. I'll be like to myself, I'll say things like, I don't really need to run today. Maybe I could do it after work, or maybe this will be my rest day. I'll do it tomorrow, or maybe never. And I'll sort of like, yeah, it would be better if I just stay. I'll just get lunch and I'll sit at my desk and I'll work through lunch. I'll eat and I'll respond to emails and that kind of thing. And it never makes it better. That is cortisol and adrenaline talking to you, and they are not being your friends, right? We actually, in these kind of situations, you actually need to do something counterintuitive and do the thing that resets your nervous system, even though your body is saying, I'm too tired, or I'm in freeze, or I'm in fight or flight, or I just want to tackle all these emails. Does that make sense? It's sort of counterintuitive. Actually, these were for our streaming friends. I was going to show this to them so that they know what to do. So the other thing I want to just underscore for all of you is that only took 6 minutes. It's not like you have to go off to a spa to reset your nervous system for a half day. 6 minutes. It's just like the walking meeting, 12 minutes, and it produces a shift. So we can be doing this as we go through the day. We can be resetting our nervous system, and then when we come back to our customers, we're in a better place. All right, last thing we're going to talk about how a little more deeply into the threat system and how that works, right? And what we can do to neutralize threats when our clients experience them. So let's talk a little bit about triggers. Anybody heard that word before? It seems like it's pretty common in the general culture right now. How would you explain a trigger to someone? If you were trying to explain it to a kid or an adult who said, I don't know, what is all this talk about triggers and trigger-free zones and stuff, yada, yada, what's a trigger? Anybody want to try to explain it?
I would classify it as something that just triggers a strong emotional response. Yep. It could be good or bad. It's just a strong emotional response.
Yep. Anybody else want to add anything to that?
A trigger reminds you of your trauma.
Yep. So it can be a sensory detail that activates something from your own past that is powerful, maybe unresolved, maybe residual, right? Something that's in the back of your brain that might not be in a fully conscious place. We store the memories of our bad experiences in a part of the limbic system called the amygdala, right? And the amygdala sends us information about who we are through our bodies, not through language, through our bodies. And then the work of healing is to figure out, hey, what is that about? Where did it come from? How do I manage this powerful response as I'm going through my day-to-day interactions? So this is kind of a technical thing that's coming up next, but I'm gonna share it anyway, just because it gives you a little bit of a sense of how triggers operate, and then how do you put them in the context of the nervous system. So a threat comes onto our radar, right? Some kind of a threat where we feel unsafe, we feel dangerous, we feel like we are endangered. And remember, especially, a threat may be an actual danger that is threatening to our very existence, or it may just be a stressor that we interpret incorrectly, right? I mean, that's the thing, is if you're coming from a background of serious adversity and you've struggled with feeling safe your whole life, any stressor feels like it's a threat to your safety. And that's why we have so many dysregulated people coming into our offices, right? Because they struggle with feeling safe in the world. So that can go one of two places, right? If you're triggered, and we're talking again, this is what happens in the mind and body of someone who's survived a lot of trauma. You go to that fight or flight place, and so this is the different coded ways in which it comes up when we're working with someone. Maybe it comes up as they're very anxious, or they're overwhelmed, or there's an emotional outburst, or they're very impulsive, or maybe we just see a lot of really rigid thinking, like very black and white thinking, not very flexible problem solving. Right? That could be one place where we go when we're triggered. The other place we might go is to that freeze response, that part of our nervous system. And then what we see is we see people who are not attending very well, kind of distracted, or maybe they just seem really emotionally shut down, right? Emotionally flat. They also may not remember things. That's a really, really common response when someone is triggered. The brain's just not working optimally. That sweet spot that we hope people are able to get to, they sometimes call it the window of tolerance. So when you recognize that you're triggered, you do certain activities, and like some of the things that we've done today even, that reset your nervous system, help you get regrounded, so that you enter what's called the window of tolerance. You're able to recognize the trigger for what it is, but you're able to get a little bit of critical distance from it. You engage your prefrontal cortex, and you're like, okay, wait a minute. I'm just talking to this nice professional from the government, and they're actually wanting to help me. This is not, a dangerous authority figure, right, or whatever the association was. You're able to stay cool, calm, connected, and collective, and you have a more cognitive flexibility to solve your challenges, to approach your challenges. That's a lot of information. Any reflections or thoughts or questions about that? Does it make kind of some intuitive sense to you? I want to take that as a maybe. I'm not going to go too much into this. They'll get the slides afterwards, right? But if you're interested in understanding more the kinds of threats, the kind of ways in which human beings are threatened, they actually fall into 5 categories. 5 categories. Status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. These are the 5 domains in which human beings feel threatened. And the interesting thing about this is I'm assuming we all live in the Pacific Northwest, right? Do you all live in the Pacific Northwest? Okay, we all should be very, very worried about natural disasters like earthquakes. We really should, more than we are, right? But as you can see, we're really more worried about how other people treat us. Right? Because again, coming back to that very early evolutionary advantage of the nervous system, the thing that mattered was whether you were part of the tribe, whether you were in good standing with the other people in your group. All of these things are about our relationships with other people. And all of these things are, we can make choices if we're in a helping professional. We make choices about how people might experience their encounter with us in all these different domains. Do people feel like they're treated fairly when they come to you? Do you make people feel like they welcome and that they belong? Do you give people choices? Do you help them predict what's going to happen as you work with them? And then what do you do to communicate that they are valued and respected, right? I did this workshop a couple months ago at a health clinic, and they made some really smart choices about how they did it. They made sure that everybody in the whole organization, everybody in the whole clinic went through the workshop on trauma-informed practices, and there were a lot of folks that didn't think they needed to be there. There were folks, for example, who worked the reception at the front desk in the clinic. They were like, this does not apply to us. We don't really see clients directly. We just check people in. But as we were going through the material and I was asking people to think about how does this apply in your workplace, actually the folks who did reception that had some of the best insights. Because one of the things that happened to them is that as the morning started, actually before they even got to their desk sometimes, there'd be a long line of people waiting to check in, people who wanted to see their doctor or their nurses. And one of the ways that they historically had dealt with the stress of having so many people waiting, but just so few of them, is they just kind of tuned people out. They just kind of kept their nose to the grindstone. They didn't make any eye contact. They didn't say anything to anybody. They just expected people to sort of self-manage and wait their turn, right? But then by the time people came up to see them and finally got checked in, they were pissed off and angry, and they would yell at them, right? And so like, maybe this isn't the best way of managing the line. And so one of the things they started to do is they started to acknowledge just a couple of us checking people in, but your time is valuable. They're working to make sure that we can get to you and that you can then get to your doctor. And we really appreciate your patience. And checking in with people and just kind of, sort of back to this and remember respecting people's time, that they even tried to get there on time, anticipating for them, this is how long we think the wait's going to be, giving people choices if they can, and just making sure people felt welcome by just acknowledging them, making eye contact, and not just ignoring them and pretending like you don't see anybody. and it improved the experience in the line. So let's do one last small group discussion with the people in your immediate vicinity. Here's the questions I want you to think about. When was the last time you worked with an individual who was triggered? Maybe a customer or a coworker. What is the impact on you when working with them, and what did you do? I'll take about 6 minutes for that, and then we'll do a report out. All right, if we could have the small group discussion come to a close. And we're going to do just like one final report out before we break for the day. So I'm just curious to hear from folks, anything that came up in your small group discussion around dealing with folks who are struggling with triggers, any strategies that you've used that help people when you're trying to help them de-escalate? People love talking in that mic. I think the mic is kind of a trigger. I think so. I know. There's actually like in a facilitator. There's some science in facilitation that says if I wait and just stare at you, eventually someone will get so anxious they will speak. But I don't think we need to go there. Any questions that came up in your discussion about how to manage triggers when you're working with your customers or with your coworkers?
Well, it's not the mic, it's going on the record.
Oh, it's going on the record. Okay, that's all right.
Anything you say, Ken, will be used against you.
Oh, there we go. All right. Well, let me... Couple final reflections I'll make then before we break for lunch. One of the major things I wanted to kind of communicate, number one, respect for all of you for the work you do. The reason I like doing the work I do is because I like working with people who've made a choice to work in places where they make a difference in other people's lives, especially people who are coming from very vulnerable places. But the other thing I want to recognize is that there's a physical and psychological and spiritual toll that takes on us as human beings. There's this personal sacrifice that goes along with choosing to do this work that I don't think we talk about it enough. I don't think we talk about it, I don't think we validate it enough, and I don't think we appreciate it enough. I appreciate that all of you do this work. One of the themes today was that self-awareness, understanding of our own bodies is what makes us stronger. It's what makes us more resilient. Having a healthy body is the strongest tool you can have to help your clients. And it doesn't mean you have to be like some kind of rock star fitness guru, but it just means you have to be basically attentive to your physical needs, nutrition, sleep, some kind of physical movement, the things that keep you solid and grounded in your body. You know, and starting with your body. When you're feeling stressed, it's often less about making meaning about things and more about checking in with your body. What do I need to do differently in my body to feel better? And when you feel better, then it's more likely that your clients will then feel better. With that said, it is 11:55, so I can stay around if folks have individual questions they want to ask. And they don't want to be mic'd when they ask it on the record. I'll even turn off my mic. I'll be up here if you have any questions you want to answer. But thank you for your patience with some of the tech issues we had today. Thanks for contributing and sharing so much. We heard from almost everyone here, so that was nice. And enjoy your lunch. Make good choices.
So final thank you. First applause for Wayne.
Thank you.